Well, hello, and welcome to the PJH Writing Command Center for another podcast episode from God Bless the Keg Publishing LLC. Woohoo! And I am John Hausleben of God Bless the Keg Publishing LLC. I'm the flagship author, chief photographer, music reviewer, music critic, do everything guy here at God Bless the Keg Publishing LLC. Ooh, with a little help from my friends. Wow. I was going to run out of air there. If you are a first-time tuner-inner, then welcome. If you are a long-time listener or a subscriber, well, then welcome back. Either way, we're just thrilled you're here to join us for this episode. And it has been some kind of week. I was going to go to the promo here, but wow, everything has been busy, for lack of a better word, but I'm feeling much better. Got that chopper out last week, and I was a little sore, still a little sore here. I don't heal quite as quick as I did in my old goalie days. Seemed like I was at the dentist every day, but we are feeling better, and voice is coming back. The jaw was really sore, but we get through all that, and we're doing great. Nottingham Forest in a relegation battle in the Premier League, and came up with this magnificent match on Friday, a 5-0 thumping of Sunderland. Still in the battle, though, and I guess that makes it exciting. And we got the NHL playoffs going on, and the Yankees are beating up on the Astros, and they beat up on the Red Sox. So there's just a lot of good stuff going on. NFL draft, and like I mentioned in my season rushing streaming podcast where I ranted a bit, you don't even have enough devices to tune all this stuff in. And I want to get to the feedback from the last podcast where we did Allison Sudol, a.k.a. A Fine Frenzy, and we rated her best 5 studio albums. Not that she had a lot of them, but we got a lot of great feedback, and I really, really appreciate that. And I want to share what one listener sent to me. But before we do that, let's get our little Orphan Annie decoder pins out, because this podcast, I got to rattle these pages, is proudly sponsored by Corporate Facilities Group Incorporated, the leader in technical consulting, facilities maintenance, facilities management, and operations, as well as property maintenance and management services throughout America. And now, CFG Incorporated is proud to announce a new department, a new initiative headed up by the amazing Mr. Steve McMillan. Let's give it up for old Steve. Steve, great guy. He brings his many years of experience as he manages pre-construction services and estimating for residential development, residential renovations, and light commercial projects for CFG Incorporated. Before you spend big bucks on a project, let old Steve Aruski check out the contractor's scope and price to make sure your hard-earned money is going in exactly the right place. Check CFG out on the web at www.culpritfacilitiesgroup1.com. That's www.culpritfacilitiesgroup1.com. Many thanks to Lydia, Steve, Liliana, Summer the dog, and Smokey the kitty cat at CFG for sponsoring the podcast. Woo! Fantastic stuff. CFG Incorporated down there in beautiful Marietta, Georgia. Say hello to Marietta Square for Paulie. So I had mentioned we did the rated on a listener's suggestion for A Fine Frenzy, Allison Sudol. And I dissected the music and invited folks, and I still invite folks to send me any suggestions for the rated series. Send them into godblessthekegpublishing@gmail.com. And I will be thrilled just to dissect the music and study it. And I had a great time with A Fine Frenzy. And this week, the world famous musical wizard, the great Jeff, he gave me a CD to study and listen to. And I've been doing that this weekend. It's Stan Ridgway, The Big Heat. I got the CD here, and I've been listening to it. I'm not going to give away anything. I want to talk to Jeff, but I love the title track, The Big Heat. I really love the title track there, and a very interesting artist. And there's also one, I think it's Camouflage, about a Vietnam veteran. But at any rate, good stuff. And then I had another listener who sent me this lovely message, a really very nice message about Fine Frenzy. And the listener was very kind and said that really enjoyed listening to Alison Sudol and didn't know too much of her music, but knew about her her acting career and such, and studied the music after the podcast. And this listener said she really appreciated that I took the time to help or study or advocate or advertise, however you want to put it, for a indie music artist. And I agree with her statement when she said there's so many fantastic artists that just fly under the radar, be it in music, be it in art, be it in writing, whatever, because it's so hard. It's so difficult to break in. And I totally agree with that. And then she sent me some nice words about my new novel and how I fly under the radar. But the great suggestion was for me to check out an artist, Nicole Atkins. So I did. I spun it last night a little bit. And she's a Jersey girl, which helped push her to the top of the list here. And she's from Neptune City. Neptune along the Jersey Shore there. And holy tamales, you talk about an artist. And like I said, she's a Jersey girl. And Jersey girls are special. They're very, very special. Wow. Unbelievable artist. And writes her own material. Great singer-songwriter. I don't know how I didn't discover her before. And she makes an appearance on David Letterman way back in 2007. The 30th of October in 2007, and sings along with her band, her backing band, Excellent. Even includes upright bass and cellos and violin. And she sings a song, a cut called Way It Is. Holy bajolies, holy guacamole, he blew me out of the water. So thank you so much for that suggestion. And I am going to continue to check out Nicole Atkins. Sorry I didn't discover her before, but thank you to that listener and anybody else. Thank you to Jeff, the musical wizard. Got to get Jeff back on the podcast shortly. And if you have any suggestions for the rated series, send it on in. It's godblessthetkegbpublishing@gmail.com. I'll be sure to check it out. Not going to guarantee Paulie's going to pursue it on an actual rated, but it'd be just fun to interact. And we do not have any not-for-profit or charities or goodwill events that made it in time to my email box. So I'm going to go back to the old standard as a organization that God Bless the Keg Publishing LLC and Paulie support. The Wounded Warrior Project is the nation's leading veteran service organization dedicated to improving the total well-being of post-9/11 wounded, ill, and injured veterans, service members, and their families. Wounded Warrior Project has innovative programs and life-changing services that strengthen mental, physical, emotional, and financial wellness, empowering warriors and their loved ones to thrive while also helping to prevent veteran suicide. Check them out on the web, www.woundedwarriorproject.org. And this is a initiative, an organization that we support in the month of May. All proceeds from my small story, it's published in paperback. We extracted it from the summer collection, Flying, about the World War II veteran and hero. All proceeds and royalties from Flying during the entire month of May go to Wounded Warrior Project. So check that out. We really love the organization, and thank you. Yes, indeed. So let's get to the meat and potatoes. Let's get to the gravy. Let's get to the side of green beans. Let's get the party started here. So this podcast came from roundabout ways. It goes back to that podcast where my buddy said one road leads to another. One conversation leads to another. About 2 weeks ago, I was studying some hockey, some NHL hockey, and a beat writer for the NHL that I follow up in Canada, wrote a very nice piece about the late, great Glenn Hall, Mr. Goalie, the unbelievable goaltender for St. Louis Blues, Chicago Blackhawks, who passed away at the age of 94 earlier this year in 2026. And Glenn Hall shared with this reporter one of his favorite books. And I studied that. And Glenn Hall particularly liked being a goalie. I can relate to defeat. I can relate to letting a puck in. So I studied that and went on the internet for the book that Glenn Hall had suggested to this reporter, and actually gave him a gift of this book. And I purchased a copy, which came like at the end of last week. And I wasn't doing too good with the old Chomperooski, so I didn't get a chance to study it until Monday of this past week. And I have it right here. It's called, the name of the book is Lines to Live By. Lines to Live By is the name of the book. And it's a big book. It's got a beautiful binding, and it's hardcover. And it's published in 1972 by a gentleman named Clinton T. Howell. And what Mr. Howell did on this remarkable book, and it even smells, I've got it here, it even smells like an old book with the old pages. And the pages are a little yellowed, and I love it. It's just amazing. And it's Lines to Live By, and it has various categories: age, beauty, books, challenge, character, death, defeat, faith, friendship, gratitude, happiness, home, hope, blah, blah, blah. It goes on and on. And he gives credit to the individuals who do these quotes under these, who wrote these quotes under these various categories. And some are public domain, so of course they don't have a notation or attribution to it. And I've been studying the book, and it's quite amazing and enjoying it. And then I started to think about quotes, and I started to think about my own lines to live by. And in my previous life of traveling all around like a nomadic fool for my primary source of income, I traveled all over the country, in fact, North America. And I met so many interesting people and encountered so many fantastic experiences. Good, bad, middle of the road, whatever. And that helped me so much in my writing career. I wrote Time Bomb in the Cupboard when I was just a kid, when I was just a teenager, my first book, and well-worn story how it resurfaced later in my life. In fact, when I was on the road and first got relocated to the Atlanta, Georgia area for my primary source of business. And I don't think, people often ask me, and I resurrected Time Bomb, and you can tell it's written by a very fledgling writer, and we left it in that form because that's the root of the story, and I believe the magic of the story. But I don't think if I had continued to write as a young man, first of all, I would have written much more material, and it would not have been much better quality than what Time Bomb was. But I like to think I progressed as a writer as I matured, but I didn't have the experiences I needed to start to detail fiction and the different cast of characters that I've introduced into my books based upon these folks that I've met along the way and the experiences I've had along the way. It's just part of the maturation process, I guess, of where I was in writing. And I look back and think, there's 54, 55 publications, things that I've written and published. And I did that basically between the year of 2010, 2012, somewhere, 2010 to present day. So conversation-wise, 16 years, not including things I wrote when I was a young man, which we pulled into the book. So that comprises of my experiences on the road and meeting people. So I was reading this book, Lines to Live By, and I thought to myself, wow, the amazing characters that I've met that shared their own thoughts, their own lines to live by. And one particular character popped in my mind. And it comes from when I used to travel all the time to California. And in my travels to California, I would have to do property checks, and I'd start in Northern California, work my way all the way down to Escondido on the Mexican border, and be out there 4 times a year, 3 times a year, whatever, and do these inspections and tours and such. But I also had to go out, and I think it was in the early summer every year for a seminar and this corporate event sponsored by one of our largest customers. And they were based in California. So I'd have to go out to Oakland area, the Bay Area, and attend this seminar. And the seminar, I'm not going to get into that. It was interesting. A giant corporation, and it was how to do business as a small business with this giant corporation who kind of promoted that they love to do business with small business and diverse companies. And at the time, our company was owned by a combat disabled veteran, which is one of the most diverse status of all company small business classifications. And then, unfortunately, he passed away, and his widow took over the company. So it was a small business owned by a woman. So still a minority, diverse business. And so I'd have to go out to these seminars, and they were usually held at these swanky hotels and these fancy places. And it was a not-for-profit type thing. And I'd go through, and it was about 4 days, 3 days, I forget. And they have all the programs and teaching you how to do business and all the complicated paperwork and how to get through and et cetera, so forth. It wasn't the most exciting thing. Yeah, the friends. I mean, it was okay. Parts of it was okay. And you got the keynote speaker. But in these types of seminars, they're always pushing agendas. And Paulie's not an agenda guy. I'm an independent in so many ways. But so I would find myself wandering. Now, a lot of my stories are around bars, for lack of a better word. And when you're on the road, you got to eat, and I like to have a few pints and enjoy myself after work. And I never go overboard, but I don't. When I go to restaurants, I don't usually sit at a table unless I really have to concentrate, do business, or I'm with a friend and I want to have a more close, intimate setting or something. But I generally just belly up to a bar. And I belly up to a bar stool. And I keep to myself, and I'm a quiet person. I'm very polite, but I don't interact. If people talk to me, I talk back, but I don't try to promote any kind of conversation generally. But on one of my seminar trips, it was in a hotel in downtown Oakland, California, the Black Hole. It was a beautiful hotel. I can't even tell you what it was or kind of remember where it was. But and they held this seminar there for like 2 or 3, maybe even 4 years in a row. And then they moved it to another venue over in Berkeley. And so when the seminar got a little boring or it was over for the day, Paulie headed for the bar. And there, and maybe I've spawned a new series, Bartender Stories, because I take these parts and pieces. And I actually created a novel and wrote a novel called Crows on the High Wire. And it's about a pub in Bloomfield, New Jersey, a fictional pub. And that's the name of it, Crows on a High Wire. Because I was sitting in a pub and with a friend, and we were chatting. And we weren't at the bar. We were doing a little business, so we needed a table. And he said to me, Paulie, look at that. All those people lined up on the bar. And we could see the bar from one end to the other. There wasn't an empty stool in the pub. And he says to me, Paulie, all of them have their own story. What's going on? What's going on in their lives? Some of them just played golf. They're watching a golf game, arguing about that. There's 2 people there, look like they're lovers. They're all touchy-feely and kissy-wissy. And then there's an old guy who just wants to fall asleep in his beer. And he says they're like a bunch of crows sitting on a high wire, just talking. And that stuck in my mind. I used that as the title and the name of the fictional pub, the title of the book and the fictional pub. But Crows on a High Wire is about a bartender. And it's loosely based on a gentleman, good friend of mine who I knew. was a bartender. And also the person I met in Oakland, California, I'm going to talk about here in a minute. I got to get all around the bend before I get back to what I was. Gene Shepard be very proud of me. But the Crows on a High Wire, it's about one specific individual, Gilly. And his real name is Xavier, and he goes by his nickname. And Gilly graduates college with a psychology degree. And I did that on purpose because so many bartenders that I met in all my travels always studied psychology, or they studied social work. And they couldn't get a good paying job, or they couldn't find a job at all. So in college, they tended bar and they made oodles of money. So when they couldn't get a job with their college degree, they went back to the bartending and stayed with it. And that's not a coinkydink, as my son used to say when he was little. Not a coincidence. I guess it's a good education to be able to relate to all the wackos and weirdos and customers and patrons that you meet along the way who come up to the bar, right? Remember, I always say a bartender should never be grouchier than I am. You go to the bar, you want to have a meal, you want to have a few drinks, you want to feel better. Nobody wants a grumpy bartender, right? I mean, yeah, he's got to be, he or she's got to be happy, right? Bring you up out of your depths of despair. And I met some grumpy bartenders along the way, and I had a lot of adventures on my 18 years on the road. And maybe I've spawned a new series, the Bartender series, a podcast to tell these stories. Anyway, I wrote the book, and it's about Gilly, and he graduates college, can't find a job, and he gets a job in a local pub. And it's the story is from when he first becomes the bartender there, all the way to when the owner retires and he ends up buying the pub, all the way through till he gets old and finally retires and sells the pub. So it's like a whole story of a lifetime in the bar and the different cast of characters who came through. But in Oakland, California, at the bar, I met a gentleman who worked the bar during the day and the early shift at night named Pete the Bartender. That's his name, Pete the Bartender. And Pete turned out to be an inspirational character for me. He's obviously a real person, but he became a fictional character in quite a number of my stories and books. And Pete was an absolute magnificent bartender, but he also had incredible insight into life, lines to live by. So when I got this book, I started thinking about some of Pete's quotes and some of the things he would say. And I would go to this bar and sit on the end, and he'd come over, knew what I drank, and we would just talk. And he knew I wrote, and I would ask him questions about his experiences, because I always say I'm not an author. I'm a storyteller at heart. That's what I'm a terrible author. I just like to tell stories by writing them down or tell them on the podcast. And Pete the Bartender was an amazing storyteller, but he also related a lot of experiences that he encountered with the people that sat at his bar. And I carry with me a little notebook. And I've done it for years and years. In fact, it's fallen apart. For Christmas, I'm going to get a new notebook. And after I met Pete on the first go around, and I realized he was just incredibly intelligent and had these profound observations and quotes and things he would say about life, I would make sure I had my little notebook and I would write them down. When I got back to my hotel room, the bar, the seminar was in the hotel and the bar was there. And so I just had to go up the elevator to my room. I would make sure to detail all this. So when I was thinking about lines to live by, I grabbed my old notebook and thumbed myself to the Pete the Bartender spot. And wow, I extracted a lot of his notes and his recommendations, his quotes, his lines to live by. And Pete the Bartender, the world's smartest bartender, he had, I have 9 quotes here, 9 observations I extracted from my notes about what Pete shared with me. And I want to share them here on the podcast. And this can be the first part one of the Bartender series. Paulie's Travels, meeting bartenders. It's pretty cool. So, number one, and this one is so important. And I'll tell a couple related stories to number one. But Pete the bartender had this quote, and he said, "The trouble with the world nowadays, Paulie, is they don't know history." And I said, "Okay, Pete, they don't know history, but what do you mean?" And he said, "They don't know history." He said, "You know how many times I'm tending bar here, and I'm listening to these conversations, and these folks are having a couple drinks, and they're getting softer and wackier, and they start arguing or debating or whatever, and they try to drag me into their conversations." And history is so important. And I wrote down some of the points, and Pete would say history helps grow culture, and it helps you understand the present based upon the mistakes of the past. And I have to agree with that. And it develops the growth of your own mind. But most of all, like Pete said, it prevents you from getting sucked into misinformation. And that stuck in my mind. So that was number one. And just over the last month or so, Pete the bartender's profound number one, that we don't know history anymore, has come to light so many times. There was a young gal working at the pub that I hang out at here locally, and she's a history major in a local college. And she was talking about history, and then she's like, "Paulie, you know so much stuff." And I was like, "Well, I don't know." So she could not name the 13 original colonies. And you know, bar debates are always so interesting. Like Pete said, they get soft. So I helped her with that. And I said, then she said, "I can't even name all 50 states." And I said, "Go ahead, try." So she got to like 40, 41, 42. So I helped her with the rest. And then I asked her a question. I said, "Can you name 3 signers of the Declaration of Independence?" She couldn't do it. She didn't know that Thomas Jefferson wrote it. I mean, this is in Virginia. And this is a history major. I said, "What, don't they? I mean, I learned this stuff in grammar school." And she said, "No, they don't dwell on that. They teach other stuff." So there you go. Pete the bartender came right in my mind there. And it is important to know history because of the misinformation. I'm not a political guy. Don't talk politics. I'm fiercely independent, not affiliated with major party. But I was sitting in another bar. It's a pattern. And it's one conversation, one road leads to another. And these chaps are debating about this thing going on with war. And the one fella says, "Oh, you know, such and such, General such and such, he's the highest ranking. He's going to be the commander of these forces for the United States. And he's the highest ranking general ever in United States history." I guess he's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff or something. So I looked over. And like I said, I usually keep myself quiet. I said, "What?" And he said, "Oh, yeah, this guy, General such and such." I said, "No, he's not." He's like, "What do you mean?" He's like a 3, 4-star, I don't know, whatever. I said, no general can ever outrank General George Washington. It was passed by Congress in the 70s. General George Washington is the highest ranking military officer ever in the United States. No one can outrank General George Washington. He's the general of the armies. He's 6 stars, 5 stars, whatever. He looks at me and says, "Washington's dead." I said, "That doesn't matter. Congress passed a law. General George Washington is the highest ranking officer in the United States military." And of course, everybody whips out their phone, Googles it, and they're all amazed. They're like, "Oh, I didn't know that." Pete the bartender. We don't know history and misinformation. Then they start debating about Greenland. This is ridiculous. We want to buy Greenland. I said, "That's not new." They're like, "What?" I said, "That's not new. We've been trying to buy Greenland since the 1800s. And President Truman, made an offer, and I did it from the top of my head, but I did cheat and look this up before the podcast, make sure I was right, in 1955 of gold to buy Greenland from Denmark. So Pete the bartender, the world's smartest bartender, it prevents misinformation. Like this is a revelation that we want to buy Greenland. We want to buy it for hundreds of years. Anyway, so that's number one. Number two is get 8 hours of sleep. And Pete would say that, so many times he had to call hotel security, drag somebody out who got all obnoxious and drunk and too much to drink. But Pete could tell they were a strung out executive trying to catch a flight in between business and just, sleep deprived. And Pete said it's so important to get 8 hours of good rest because your mind is scrambled if you don't. And being a person that traveled and lived that life, I can understand it gets bone tired and you get weary and you don't make proper decisions. You make dumb decisions. So that's number two from Pete. Number three is an old one, of course, never discuss money, religion, politics. But Pete took it a little farther. And he said, stand here, Paulie, all these years, I listened to all these fights about sports, about religion, about politics, whatever, all these debates that these folks get into. And I think to myself, if somebody's a fundamentalist and is very zealous, if they believe the Los Angeles Dodgers are the greatest baseball team ever, and the guy's a Yankee fan and they argue, neither of them are ever going to change each other's minds. It makes no sense to argue with somebody who's a zealous person about the subject, that's infatuated. It's not going to budge. A fundamentalist, their fundamental belief is that the Los Angeles Dodgers, or whatever belief they are the greatest baseball team ever. And you can show facts, you can show history, you can say that the Yankees got 27 world championships. They're not going to change their mind. So Pete's point was, it's a dopey conversation. It's just going to lead to bad blood and everybody mad. Don't even try. The person is not going to change their mind. Pete the bartender. Number four, never read self-help books or watch any self-help TV shows. And I stole this one for an interview that I did it subliminally. Callie Rose did an interview with me years ago for the old YouTube channel. And I know I stole this from Pete the bartender. I'm sorry, Pete. I apologize. Because Pete was very adamant. He said, why would I take advice from who fixed that person? What? Who fixed you? And now you want to tell me and buy the book and it's not going to do me any good? But it always stuck in my mind. Who fixed them? Number five, don't take advice from someone that you would not take criticism from. Wow. Yeah, can totally relate to that one. Yeah, don't take advice from someone that you would not take criticism from. Pete the bartender. Number six is always, and this is, he uses music, but this is about conversation too. It's about noise. It's about music. It's about background. It's about words, conversation. Number six, listen carefully to the music before you ever decide to comment on it. And what Pete meant is, I love Jethro Tull. You can't listen to Jethro Tull one time and understand Jethro Tull. You have to listen to the music a number of times. So what Pete is saying here is sometimes you hear what you want to hear and you make a judgment based upon it before you really, really listen to the music. And that goes back to what my grandfather said, born in England, my mom's father. And Gramps always said to me, Paulie, don't make a decision based upon emotions. Only make decisions based upon facts. If somebody says something on the right side, you listen. Somebody says something on the left side, you listen. Somebody says something right in the middle, you listen. Then you step back, you study it, and make a decision based upon not only those inputs, but based upon the facts. Listen to the music before you comment on it. Pete the bartender. This one's funny because In my notes, I probably could have broken this rule and extracted more quotes, but I purposely stopped at number 9. Number 7, never make a to-do list with 10 or more items on it. You'll never complete them. Right? I overbook my life. I overbook my weekends. I overbook my work days. I overbook my schedules, my writing. I have got 2 books I want to get out this year, and I don't know that I'll get them done. Never make a list with more than 10 items on it because you're not going to get them done. So you break it up into other lists. Pete the bartender. What a guy, right? Number 8. And I started to interview people about this about a month ago and take notes and put it in my notebook. Older folks, middle-aged folks, young people, because there's so much going on in this world these days, so much happening, all these different things coming in the technology and the AI and all these different ways of doing business and a different culture. Everything's changed. My buddy Harry, the great Harry, says, how the world has changed in 15 years. Wow, how the world has changed since COVID. Never mind, 15 years. My goodness. So number 8 from Pete the bartender was work hard. Now I know bartending is a very hard job. It's very physical, very demanding. You're on your feet all day long. You got to deal with wacko people. You have to pay attention to detail. You have hygiene. You got to clean. You got to keep yourself moving. I've seen everybody thinks of the bartender with his foot up on the bar rail, sitting there talking about the Yankees. And I'm sure there's downtime. That's how I compiled these notes with Pete and this is over the 3 or 4 years that we spent time in that hotel for the seminar. Hard work. I mean, it's like the barber, the old time barber, right? He's on his feet all day long with his arms extended out, clip, 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 clip. For 40 years, and your lower back and your feet and your legs, and everybody, Father Time, undefeated. But bartending is hard work. And I know in my discussions with people, particularly young people, and I understand a lot's changed in the world. And these corporations now with AI and all the things, you see these hardworking, good employees getting tossed aside right and left, and it's very sad. Very sad, they lose their positions and the hard work and the dedication is ignored. So I see both sides of that story. But for Pete to have been a success, and he was a success. I mean, this is a very thriving hotel with a very brisk business. I imagine he made a very good living. But he did work hard. And I always frown upon people when they look upon somebody in the service business. And it kind of minimizes what they do, what their skills are, what their experience is, what their talents are, their intelligence level. I mean, Pete, I kid and I give everybody a nickname, so he's the world's smartest bartender. But the man, very profound and very intelligent and very observant in gathering all these observations over these years. So, yes, it is hard work. And he probably got well rewarded in tips and everything because of his dedication and his hard work. So that's number 8 is work hard. And number 9, and Pete said, this is the hardest thing I had to do as a bartender. And sometimes I couldn't do it. Sometimes it's mind your own business. And I understand what Pete means because there's a couple times when I didn't mind my business when I went and sat at a bar. And it's just, like I said, I mentioned about the general of the armies that I overheard the discussion. I rarely will, unless I know the person really well, interact, especially if I'm on the road with strangers. Seen a lot of wacky stuff in bars over the years. You get the lounge lizards hitting on you and all these crazy things going on. Sports arguments, God forbid you go in there with a Yankee hat on, there's a Red Sox guy at the bar. Or you go in there with your Philadelphia Flyers hat on, there's a Pittsburgh Penguin fan there. You got to pick, you're best wearing neutral clothing. And I did share that Dire Straits story at the bar in Florida. But so I have lots of bar stories. But mind your business And Pete said, very difficult because people suck me into their conversations. They're like, what do you think, Pete? Are the Yankees a better ball team? Whatever the subject is. Who should be president next? Blah, blah, blah. And Pete says, I always try to take a neutral position because I want to get a nice tip from both. I want to make anybody angry. So I try to mind my business. And here's one that Pete said to me. He said, a lot of these altercations, a lot of these terrible situations in the world going on could be avoided if people would just mind their own business. Pete the bartender. And I have one story here, that I did open my mouth because I just couldn't, in good conscience, sit by and let this go on. And I'd like to share that quick story here. And then I'll wrap up Pete's 9 items here, 9 items to live by. So I'm in a bar here I want to say it was somewhere outside in Atlanta, Georgia. And I was on my travels. I lived in Atlanta for a while, but this was before I lived there. And I needed to meet a client, and then I needed to get something to eat. And we did some quick business. The client had to move on. So I moved from a table to the bar. And I was actually going to get a meal there. I didn't eat at the table. We just had a couple cocktails. And once the client moved on, I ordered some food. And this was a swanky joint. It was a really nice joint. And I want to say it was in Sandy Springs, but I'm not sure. Sandy Springs, Georgia. So I sitting there at the bar, and there was a young fella there. A handsome guy, well-dressed, and he's with his buddies, and they're all handsome guys, and they're young, and they got fancy spray tans, and they have fancy watches, and they're hot shots. These are good-looking young guys. And there were 2 or 3 bartenders working the bar. It's a big place, busy. And it was a young gal working this end of the bar in front of us, and I ordered some food and got, I think I got a beer. And she's very busy. And this fella next to me, this swanky guy, he's eyeing up this young gal, and he's on his expense report, so he's going to try to make time with her. And he says, I want a perfect Manhattan. Mix me a perfect Manhattan. This gal was young. This bartender was a young gal. So she goes and takes the order, and she mixes the Manhattan. She comes back, and I'm watching him, and she sets the Manhattan. And he takes one little sip of the Manhattan. He says, this is not a perfect Manhattan. And she says, I'm sorry. I thought I did a good job. Let me redo it. And I raised my eyebrow a little bit. Thought to myself, oh boy. Gal goes back, rinse, repeat. And she prepares the drink and brings the cocktail and sets it in front of the guy. And the guy takes the same thing, takes another sip, takes another half sip, smacks his lips a little bit, and he's like smiling to the gal, showing how handsome he is. And she says, is that one okay? And he says, this is not a perfect Manhattan either. I said, oh boy. And she's like, really? I really did the best job I could on it. And I'm so sorry. I'll make another one. She dumps another drink out. And she says, you know something? I'm going to get my supervisor he's working the other end of the bar. If you can just wait a minute, I want it to be a good Manhattan for you. And I said, wait, hold up, time out. I didn't mind my own business. I broke Pete's rule. I said, young lady, I said, he's playing with you. And I turned to him. I said, I don't know why you're doing this. I said, why are you doing this? She's trying to make a living here. If she's got to pay for those drinks, she got to be accountable for those drinks that are supposedly mixed incorrectly. I said, it's not a perfectly made Manhattan. He's playing games. And now he's like looking at me, and he's got to stand up and get tough. I said, it's not that you're not mixing the ingredients perfect. I say a perfect Manhattan is half sweet vermouth, half dry vermouth. Just look up the recipe. It's not that you're not making a great Manhattan, a great cocktail. He's playing games with you. I said, she has to pay for that, pal. I said, I'm from New Jersey. We don't mess around with games. We don't do stuff to people who are working hard, trying to make a living. And here you are, all fancy. I said, I'll tell you what. The drinks you had to pour out, you put them on my tab, and I'm going to pay for them. And she smiled at me. She said, you don't have to do that. I said, no. I want to do that. I said, and you need to conduct yourself more professional. So he didn't say a word. She made the Manhattan, a perfect Manhattan. Well, yeah, so I didn't mind my own business, but I couldn't sit there and just let this young, sort of inexperienced bartender, very beautiful young girl, trying to make it, working hard, and having to pour these drinks out that her boss is going to say, what? It's just $18 cocktail. So there it is. Pete, the world's smartest bartender. So to recap Pete's lines to live by. Number 1 is no history. Number 2 is get 8 hours of sleep. Number 3, never discuss money, religion, other subjects with zealous persons or fundamentalist belief persons. You will never win the arguments. Number 4, never read self-help books or watch self-help TV shows. Number 5, don't take advice from someone that you would not take criticism from. Number 6, listen carefully to the music before you comment on it. Number 7, never make a to-do list with 10 or more items on it. You will never complete them. Number 8 is work hard. And number 9, mind your own business. So there you go. Pete, the world's smartest bartender. Oh, boy, we had a blast doing this. And I got so many papers here today, and I just realized my chair is squeaky too. So upcoming podcasts, we are excited. We have Cousin Jack. We got Cousin Jack. My Cousin Jack is going to come on. We met this week, and Cousin Jack loves conspiracy theories and all these events that are going on in the world, and he's an expert on it. And Cousin Jack's researching a subject, and we're going to bring the great Cousin Jack on the podcast. So we're very excited to talk to Jack about his theories and all this strange and eerie stuff going on, and UFOs and all this stuff. Jack's great. We love it. We're going to get Frankie T back. We're going to talk NFL, old NFL versus the modern NFL. And of course, we got Jeff the Musical Wizard. We're trying to find the proper subjects. I'd love to get Jeff and Frankie T together. And I think I'm going to give them an assignment and let them research the music and come on the podcast. But anyway, hey, send those suggestions in. We love it. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hey, please be kind, be gentle, be very tolerant. Remember, kindness is for free. Spread it around as much as you can. It can only make this world a better place. But hey, I don't know anything compared to Pete, the world's smartest bartender. I'm just a guy from Paterson, New Jersey. So thank you so much. Let me get these folks out of here. We got a lot of things to do today. Thank you for tuning in, and bye-bye for now.